can hear you. Yes.
You can
It's
hear me?
muffled. Now
Better.
Okay.
Ooh.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to 60 Minutes of Unscripted Entertainment in .NET. As doctors of .NET, we prescribe healthy choices. In today's episode, we're going to focus on eyesight. We want you to see sharp. We've got some very Today is already, it's a Monday. There was a button that was pressed. Oh, wow. It's unscripted.
You mentioned eyesight?
And here we are live.
Yes. So let's just do an introduction to our guests. We've got Mads to start.
Yeah, hey, I'm Mads Torgersen, and I work for Microsoft, and I'm the lead designer of C# currently.
And then we've got Bill Wagner.
I'm Bill Wagner. I also work for Microsoft. I'm responsible for the docs on the C# language and other managed languages, F# and VB. So I pretty much write what Mads tells me.
We've got Jon Skeet.
Hi, I'm Jon. I work at Google, working on the .NET client libraries for Google Cloud Platform. And I'm the convener of the ECMA C# Standardization Committee, so I tell Mads that he's done it wrong.
I love that. And I forgot this part, but I'm your host, David Pine, and I'm with Myra, co-host.
Hello.
Say hi, Myra.
Hello.
So this is unscripted, and we're going a bit out of our typical segmentation. Typically, we'll have our introduction like we just done, and then we'll have a checkup doc. But today, with the Ask Me Anything, perspective, we're going to switch it up a little bit. So we're going to go right into an announcement that our guests have wanted to share. So I'm going to share my screen, press buttons, and hope for the best.
So who will share the news?
Who's going to do it?
I guess I got to press the button. I'll go ahead and start. So the ECMA committee, which Jon convenes, we have been working largely in private, which made it really hard to work between this open source C# Lang innovation, the open source Roslyn compilers, and then it gets handed to the committee that does everything in private. And every few years, emerges with 800 pages of a new spec. And so what we did is we put the standardization into the .NET Foundation as a submission there and licensed it to the foundation. And now the committee that Jon convenes, we're going to be doing all of the standardization work in public. So,
wow, that's pretty neat. So what does that really mean to people who are outside looking in? Are they able to help influence this or post issues, concerns, suggest features? Is this where that happens, or is it a different location?
Most of those. Not really suggest features. So for new features, the sort of pipeline is Mads's team over on C# Lang, if I'm right, Mads, or maybe on Roslyn. Yeah. They receive feature requests for, C# 55 or whatever's coming out next month. So those all get worked through in the current process. We're not trying to change any of that. Then when we eventually reach steady state, which I think will take quite a while, there'll probably be a version of Visual Studio and the Roslyn compiler that has C# version 55. And then after that's already actually shipped, we'll probably get that within the standardization committee, not make any changes to what the features are, just work on really polishing the language, the language so that it's clear, unambiguous, a little bit more. Sometimes features are described as initially, and then as the standard for C# 55.
Was Jon kind of blipping out for just me? Or
Yeah.
Okay.
yeah, a little bit, but I think we got most of that, and I think that's kind of the key of the pipeline. It starts with C# Lang, and all of these are public now, which is nice. So
Yep.
If you're interested in commenting on new features, .NET/C#Lang, you can see the proposals and so on. And then from my standpoint, one of the things that I think is really going to be useful for people looking in from the outside. So if you look at the docs for C#, especially in the language reference area, for years, they've almost parroted the spec because the spec was several revisions behind. And, you could download it with Visual Studio or you could get from the ECMA site, but it didn't have any of the new stuff in it. And that means we had 2 or 3 or more different places to describe a feature. And now we're continuing to pull that forward. If you notice on docs.microsoft.com, we're publishing a version of the C# spec that's out of C#Lang. As we get further along in this process, I'm going to flip the switch so that that's going to be the draft from this repo that the committee's been working on and continuing to update that as the committee has new drafts available. And what that also means then is that C# language reference content is going to be a lot shorter, so you get a feel of the feature and you know how to use it. But if you want the absolute spec details of everything as to how everything is described, it's easier to point to the spec and have that one source of truth there.
Right. So is it my understanding that this is the first time this is formally being announced, this open repo?
Yeah. This is
excitement.
It's been out for how long has it been public for? Like
about a week.
About a week,
Yeah.
but we didn't really make any announcements about it yet. We were like, we're gonna go on David and Myra's show and put that.
Yeah, and Dan had a good question, I think, here. Like, could you present the repo a bit, since it's like he knows it's open source, but like, what does it mean to open a language spec?
If you
repo?
scroll down, David,
Yep.
you're going to see a really large table of contents that shows the entire spec.
Okay.
Why don't we walk through the whole of the
block.
expressions chapter? That won't take long.
There we go. Let's do it.
So, and we built some tooling here so that each individual clause has a link to it. So as Jon commented, we don't have to just go to expressions and then look through several hundred pages. There will be a link to each different kind of expression and so on. This is all in a single folder called, strangely enough, standard, which will be the C# standard. And that's just going to be the markdown files that include the entire spec. So it's just the whole spec written in markdown. And if you look at the pull requests on it, these are the things that we've started working on for C#6 and beyond.
Okay.
And we can comment on what the language will be for those updated versions.
Okay. Awesome. I did notice one thing at the table of contents back when I was initially hovering over that. There was a 5 standard and a 6 draft, but I do understand that there's, C# 7, 7.1 to all the point releases 8 and 9 and soon to be 10 come November. So it looks like there's some work to be done. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah,
It is.
absolutely.
Now we do have feature specs, or to some degree. I mean, we've been building the features off of feature specs for individual features in the C# Lang repo, but there's still quite a bit of work left to take those and massage them into the overall specification text that is the standard. It's actually, a big thing that maybe we didn't make a big point of here is that the standard used to be one big Word file that we would have to somehow coordinate edits to, and now it's all Markdown based. It's actually in here a Markdown to Word generator so that we can produce Word and then from there PDF for the official standard whenever we submit those. But it's now all in Markdown, so it's easy to work with as collaboratively as a document and in an open source way, so that while people can't submit feature proposals for C# here, they have to go and do that in C# Lang. They can submit proposals for how to spec a feature or how to improve the specification of a feature and participate in an open source fashion that way easily because it's all in Markdown.
And I think Mads briefly alluded to a bit of history there that I think is also really important. We have specs that the team has done for the C# 7, 8, and 9 features. And if you go all the way back to the C# 2.0 spec, it was here's C# 1, and here are new chapters that describe what changed for C# 2. And I think somebody I know fairly well did a lot of work in C# 3 to really bring all of those together into one cohesive document that describes C# 3. And then the committee went through and brought the specs together for C# 5. And now, by looking at those proposals and bringing the specs for the new features in, we really want to integrate them into the language as a whole, so we don't have that. Here's the appendix for C# 7, the appendix for 8, and so on.
Yeah, that's awesome. This is great. I love that it's being done in the open. I love that people can come and kind of visualize the effort that's put into specking this out, because I can only imagine the amount of work this actually takes. So I tip my hat to you, fine gentlemen, and appreciate the effort. Why don't we switch over now to some of the questions? We did have a form that was put together kind of preemptively to encourage the community to ask questions preemptively. So I do want to just remind our viewers who are live right now, if you do have questions, please post questions in chat and we'll propagate those. We'll try to interleave those with some of the questions that we've had that were asked preemptively. But let's start off right away with, I think and I'm going to say this quite selfishly, this was my question. So, because it's hard to choose just one favorite feature. So I want to know, if you could only pick one feature that would be your favorite, what would it be? And we'll start with Mads.
Well, my flippant answer to that is going to be the one I'm working on right now. It's always the case that I'm deeply engaged with some feature, and it's like awesome sauce, and it's the one that is going to change everything. So those are weasel words, but right now I'm deeply engaged in statics and interfaces, which is a feature that we're building, but that probably won't make C# 10. And it's very exciting because it lets interfaces specify operators and that kind of stuff for classes to have to implement. And so we can start getting abstraction over numerics. Generic numeric algorithms and so on will finally be nice in C#. That's super exciting, and that's what's on my mind right now. So that's my favorite feature right now.
Awesome, thank you. I'll throw it to Bill.
Right now I'm going to go with pattern matching, and in some ways for some of the same reasons that Mads mentioned. It is always hard to pick because I really enjoy programming in C#. And there's two reasons why I like this one. One of our community members, Peter Kolakov, has been really working hard to describe all of pattern matching for the C# language reference. And through a series of PRs we just merged today, we'll be able to see that on docs tomorrow. Here's all the pattern matching for C# 9. And the other one, it's one of my favorite demos still, is I take this lengthy set of if then else things that goes through a large number of rules for a tutorial. That's like almost 3 pages of if then else, if this, that things and nested stuff. And it turns into about 15 lines of pattern matching with different cases on 3 variables. And it's not only just shorter, it's just so much more readable to see what the business rules you're trying to implement are. And I think when done well, that's a great use of pattern matching. It shows how you can really describe the rules you're trying to follow in a very concise and very readable syntax.
Awesome. Jon?
Cool. Well, first I'll apologize if my connection keeps dropping down. It does keep freezing for me listening to everyone else. With Bill talking about pattern matching, I guess I probably shouldn't use switch expressions as my favorite feature because it's a little bit too close to his. So I will go with expression bodied members. So instead of you're writing a method with braces in, you just use the fat arrow and then put your one expression. And it makes me feel like an F# programmer, and I gain 5 IQ points when I do that. So but I do love it, and I find, well, when I occasionally used to work in code bodies that I couldn't do that in, I was immediately frustrated. So yeah, that's my favorite fairly small feature. You've got big features like generics. Where would we be without generics? But like little just
Absolutely, yeah. That's awesome.
And I was gonna ask, like, what was your favorite from the latest features? But you all picked like some of the more recent ones, so it was perfect.
I got another question here. I'm not watching the comments coming in, so Myra, let me know if we should propagate.
Okay, yeah, we have a couple coming as well, so
Okay.
But I think we can go through the pre-submitted and go.
Okay. I'll add that next one here. So. I love C#, but what's your biggest regret in C# that you've always been afraid to talk about openly? I love that, because they're just kind of like, you've never said this before anywhere else. Why don't you tell us live on the air in front of lots of people? So we'll throw that one to Mads first.
Well, I think I've aired all my dirty laundry in public before, and there are a couple of things that I wish we had done differently. I guess if it's a regret, it has to be something that I was part of, so it has to be after I joined the team. I think that there are some things about the dynamic feature that I regret a little bit. It's a very, very useful feature. But we were building it with a future of .NET in mind that never came to pass, which was that we would have a number of dynamic languages also running on .NET. We had Iron Python and Iron Ruby, and so we did some language choices there about the semantics of dynamic that are very, very expensive, just from a performance viewpoint, and hard to maintain for us as well. Like, we essentially run part of the C# compiler at runtime to determine what to do, and that's I wish we had done a simpler version of that. I mean, it's like, it is what it is. We can't really change it now.
Right.
I think it would have been, if it had a different trade-off between performance and versus fidelity to the C# compiler. At compile time, I would have chosen better performance and less fidelity.
Awesome. Yeah, our viewers couldn't see this, but I could see in our little tray window here, Jon shaking his head agreeingly the entire time, especially once you said dynamic. So we're going to throw it to Jon, and then we'll go to Bill.
Okay, so I've never been in Microsoft, I've never been part of the C# team. There's nothing that I've been afraid to openly talk about. So for years, I have said that classes should be sealed by default. Absolutely. We already get halfway there with, you've got to write virtual when you want a virtual method. So let's go all the way to preferring composition over inheritance and say sealed by default. And it's obviously far too late to change that now. The other thing that I would like to have seen, it's a sort of regret over C# and .NET itself. I would have loved to see more attention paid to how versioning would work. Versioning is just a big part of my life, even more so than dates and times. And there are some difficult things to work out in terms of how versions should work and how you assemble an application that has a bunch of compatible versions, and how you could I would love the idea of a private dependency, so that one NuGet package could depend on Node-time version 2, and another package could depend on Node-time version 3, and you could use both of those in the same application, so long as it didn't leak that dependency out to the world, that sort of thing. So yeah, I think there's a lot of work that could be done with a brand new runtime, brand new language, etc. I would love to see some more work on versioning right from the start, because if you don't get it right to start with, you've got no chance, really.
Awesome. Bill?
Yeah, I think And again, I've never really involved in the design of anything other than, explaining it and documenting it and trying to teach others how things work. The one that I think is the most difficult right now is a lot of the nuances around nullable reference types, because they were added not in version 1, which and not as part of the type system that the CLR has. And here it's things like, when you allocate an array, even if that array is of non-nullable reference types, well, all the elements are null anyway, because it's an array and we don't call constructors for everything and so on and so forth. So, and to make that change would be a huge performance impact, right? You'd have to initialize all those things, and maybe it's not what you wanted anyway. So you'd be initializing it to something else and in your code and, very shortly. So, there's a lot of really hard work that I have a tremendous amount of respect for, from the compiler team, the people working on the APIs and the attributes, to make it as seamless as possible. But it's still not as seamless as it could have been if the type system at version 1.0 had that distinction in it.
Awesome.
Okay, I'll switch to one of the audience questions now. So, Wolfchen Lutz, hopefully I got it right. I don't know. So, when will the next C# version will be released? You mentioned in passing throughout some of the statements, but also how are we thinking about versioning in the next year's for us? Because it seems like we are aligning C# versions with the .NET releases. So, is that what's happening?
Yep.
Yeah, for the foreseeable future, we'll just ship a new version of C#, new major version of C# yearly at the same time as there's a new major version of .NET. That's just easier that way.
Yep. And as an aside, so every November is the annual schedule for .NET versions to release. So .NET 6 is coming in November this year, and that's going to be an LTS version, which is very important. .NET 5, when it came out, was not an LTS version. So that's something to consider as well. So I think they're going to LTS every other year.
Right.
Yeah,
and
every other year. Yeah.
There's probably a subtlety that I document on this in terms of the language, and Mads can expound on this too. There's a very, very high bar for compatibility for the language. So even though that .NET 5 is not LTS, everything that's in C# 9 is going to be supported in C# 10. There aren't going to be breaking changes that make major breaks. And so, suddenly we've changed the syntax or something, right? I mean, there are always little things that might be different, but C# 9 code will compile. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a very good point. The LTS designation is almost meaningless at the language level. It's very important for the runtime, but for the language, everything is pretty much never break anything is our motto. So
I figured it was worth mentioning, with Jon's mention of versioning.
Yeah.
And even the support level is the same between LTS and current. Is just like the length of how long it's supported.
Right.
So it's also important to think about that, because sometimes people feel like the current is less, but in terms of supportability, but it's the same.
Awesome. We do have another one here, and looking at Swift, and this is again anonymous, so I just took what they had posted and put it in here. So looking at Swift, it seems as though they've failed in so many ways by creating a million different ways to do the same thing. What's your biggest fear with the future of C#? I think they're kind of leading you a bit with the potential for a million different ways. I think that's programming in general, though, and I'll let we'll start with Bill this time.
Oh, wow. Okay, so my biggest fear is related to that is that out-of-date Stack Overflow answers are still how everyone codes, right? And I mean, I'm being a little flippant here because Stack Overflow is a great resource for people. But when you look at things and you see an answer of something that was the right way to do something with the syntax we had in, say, C#2 or C#3, and there's much, much better ways and more concise ways to write the same code now. There's 20 years of upvotes on this one answer, and it's hard to move the whole community into that new area. So a project that we're working on now, specifically in Docs, is if you're teaching someone C# now, what is the right subset to start with? And it's not C# 1.0. It's the right way to write the most simple code or the most straightforward code that you can write now with C# 9, or soon with C# 10 with some of the enhancements that Mads' team is working on. Right. So like we don't teach, here's how you declare a delegate and make a function and make a pointer to it and declare an object and so on. We just make a lambda and say, there it is, and so on. So there's a lot of things there that I think there's ways that a lot of this kind of falls on me to say, here's how you do things now. Here's other things that you'll probably see in the field or probably in code that you support. And then, the language improvements are to make it easier for us to do things.
I'm envisioning now a bot that will scan all of the top C# related Stack Overflow questions, and will use their admin rights to basically use Roslyn APIs, take in the little snippets and upgrade it to the latest versions and say, here's the different versions and how to do right? No, probably not that easy.
And there are some great tooling that, the Visual Studio team does to give you the screwdriver, the light bulb to go, you can use something else here that might actually make it simpler and easier to use, and that helps too.
But that's a great point, Bill.
John?
So flippantly, it's that Mads will work so quickly and so hard that I will never, ever get round to doing a 5th edition of C# in depth, because every time I think I'm about to get there, he releases a new version and it takes me at least a year to catch up. So the 4th edition of C# in depth only goes as far as C# 7. So I'm already looking at, it's at least 2 or 3 years work. So I couldn't envisage doing one that didn't go as far as C# 11. And chances are I'll fall a bit behind. So it'll be up to C# 14 or something. So that's the flippant answer. But actually, there's a grain of serious aspect in that, which comes back to what Bill was saying about teaching someone who is new to C#. And I do wonder at some point whether C# will just get too big for anyone to know. And that doesn't mean that any new feature it would prove itself in terms of being a good thing that makes the language easier to use. I just fear that it used to be feasible to know all of C# reasonably well, and you could sort of carve off, I don't know unsafe stuff, but I kind of know the rest fairly well. That will be feasible for.
Interesting. And I'll throw it to you now, Mads.
Yeah, well, I think it is we find ourselves in a fundamental dilemma here where there will always be improvements we can make, important improvements, not just because, hey, we thought of something new, but really the world of programming changes. There are new domains. We're all now talking to the cloud, and so async is very important. When C# was developed, that was not much of a thing. And also just the programming languages themselves, like as a discipline, evolve. So we learn new things about how we can do things, and so we're faced with the choice of either keep updating C# so that it is as relevant as newer languages for new workloads, or fall behind and become a legacy language. It's either of the two, really. And so we've chosen the first one of those very sort of explicitly and deliberately. We're saying, like, we will, in fact, evolve C#. We will introduce new ways of doing things, sometimes for convenience, if the convenience is high enough, like Jon's expression-bodied members, and sometimes to really express something new, like the statics and interfaces I talked about before. But we will keep doing it. And we'll just have to see what happens. Yep. We'll have to deal with the dangers that presents as we go along, because the alternative is that we're essentially starting the retirement of C#, and we are not at all ready for that. Like, not even close.
Yep. And there's another thing that I'll add onto this after, as everybody said, coming back to where I'm talking about, like, what's the subset you learn first and so on. In your domain. For everyone watching this now or watching the recording later, you can pick and say, here's the things that we're going to use all the time. And here are things maybe we don't need, like Jon mentioned, unsafe, right? And there are some other things that are being added that maybe they just don't fit your domain. Then, you don't have to use them. right? If it doesn't fit the problem you're trying to solve, that's okay. Use the things that really help and make you more productive and so on. And I think every group I've ever worked with reaches a point where they say, to Jon's point, I can't learn absolutely everything. So here's the parts we're going to use because they work the best and they are the things that we need.
And that sort of ends up being a little bit like how C++ is often used. It's not a language itself. It's a pick and choose. I will construct my own C++ via, I'm not going to use exceptions. I'm going to use X, Y, Z. And so every team you work on has to have a style guide for these are the things we will use. So it becomes feasible, but there is an expense there. And to be really clear, I am in no way trying to suggest that Mads is doing the wrong thing by continuing to build new and great features. I get nervous about it, partly because, it causes me work.
Because you can't keep up with the books, right?
Yeah.
All right, let's go from one from the audience. So what makes C# different from other languages? So it's like we have so many frameworks and languages out there. So why would someone pick C#? I have some of these on top of my mind because I'm working on the new C# page for the Dana website, but I want to hear from you.
Who should we go to first?
Well, we're all biased.
I can try to give an answer. I was talking to David Fowler a week or two ago, as I often do, who might be known to many of the audience as one of the architects of ASP.NET. And one of the things we realized in that conversation was C#, in many ways, if you think about languages in different layers of like the level of abstraction, like functional languages up here and systems programming languages down here, C# is a language and has always been a language that tried to span pretty broadly here, but probably more so than most other programming languages that you can find, certainly popular ones. If you look at, where it sort of came in, it was very much seen as a competitor of Java and being on a similar level of abstraction, if you will, for good reason. But if you look a little closer, it had structs and it had unsafe and it had all kinds of things that were targeted at writing more efficient code by using lower level abstractions too. And so this span between almost being able to write C++ level stuff, and now recently also with many safer features like span and ref and so on, all the way up to having very high level abstractions. I think it's part of the reason why C# has been picked up in so many different domains that we didn't even think about as we made the language. That's my take on it anyway.
Anyone else, Bill or Jon, want to chime in on this one?
Yeah, I'll echo what Matt said, and it's the exact same reason. And I've used it as a slightly different analogy. It's like if you think back of like even going back all the way to VB6, which was like super productive. I can drag and drop and I can do things, and it's just really quick to build apps. But then you would reach this point where it's like, oh, it's got to be faster. It's got to do something VB didn't support. And now you're in C++ building an ActiveX control and doing some very difficult things. And you can see that in some other environments now. You build something and there's a language interop layer to C, so you can write the really fast stuff in C, or something of that nature. And in C#, you can kind of stay anywhere, you stay in C# and, maybe I need to really tweak this and make it a little faster. So I'm going to do something like, ref structs and write my own little bits here to avoid allocations, but you stay in the same language so you can continue to grow your app and to grow the things you need. So it's one of those languages that, and Matt, speaking to some of the new features that came in C#9 and in C#10, it's hopefully easier and approachable to start programming in C#, but it should never be a language that you outgrow and have to learn something else to write more professional programs or faster programs or what have you.
Jon, do you have anything to add here? Or?
Just sort of almost a different way of looking at the same things that Mads and Bill said. I love the fact that C# is type safe. So I I know loads of people love Python, JavaScript, etc. I'm just a fan of static typing. So it's nice and safe on that front. It's brief, and the C# team have evolved it very almost aggressively in a good way to make it briefer and briefer to do things, whether that's var or expression body members or lambda expressions, etc., and still readable. Readable by me. So this is entirely subjective. I know that F# developers will be saying, F# is much more brief and much, even safer than C#. And that's great, but I can't read F#. I have tried learning F# a couple of times, and I've just not quite, I haven't adjusted my mindset for it. So with my, possibly old school perspective on things, C# gives me those three things of readable, safe, and brief, concise, all in one bundle, as well as spanning the stack, as Bill was saying, and being spanning the stack and spanning the systems to high level abstractions, as Mads was saying. So yeah, great stuff.
Awesome.
All right. Do you have one from the pre-submitted?
Yep, I've got more. Here's another one. So what's your unbiased favorite tutorial for C#? I know that you've all written many tutorials, so it's hard to be unbiased. And then kind of a continuation of that, they're specifically asking about a C# certification. I'm not familiar with that one specifically, but yeah, I threw it up here anyways. So go.
Well, my favorite tutorial is the one that Bill talked about earlier that he wrote for pattern matching. That one is just really, really, it's excellent because it teaches you how to use good pattern matching. It sells the feature to you by showing how nicely it can be used, and it's just like, it's better than anything we imagined when we created the feature. So that one's just that's his legacy, man. That's like.
And to be clear, what's the price tag on that one? Free of charge. Yours free. Of charge.
I don't know about. I'm sorry, I don't know about C# certification.
I'm not familiar with it either. Then no worries. Bill, you can't pick your own, so you got to pick.
Yeah, I know. I am going to throw to a colleague, Maria Nagaga, has worked with me a lot and really driven the things that my name is on it as author, but she had really significant input into it in terms of our 101 series, our just, you're a brand new programmer, here's C# series. And those would not be as approachable or as useful as they are without all the work she did, half writing at least 3 of them, outlines and samples, and here's how beginners think and so on. That turned me into almost a typer from her brain for a while. So I think those are the other ones that I really, really like.
And how much do those cost?
Those are also free on docs.microsoft.com. And awesome. And on the certification, I honestly don't know which one they're referring to. I know there's work going on that eventually there'll be a curriculum on MS Learn, but I don't think the full C# curriculum is there yet. Keep watching. We're adding new stuff almost constantly. But,
And I love the shout out to Maria because she's doing great stuff on the interactive space, and we should have her on the show and we should talk to her.
Yes.
Yeah, she's awesome.
The .NET Interactive Notebooks and VS Code is just a phenomenal thing to use. I'm excited about that one too.
John?
So I should look at some more tutorials. I haven't looked at any for quite a while, I'm afraid. Which is, I have the perfect opportunity as I haven't really looked at C# 9 properly yet. So I should start reading through all the C# 9 tutorials and sort of see which ones I prefer. And in terms of certification, I have never taken any C# certification myself. So, and I really don't know how valuable it is. I guess there's the two halves of certification value. One is what you learn in order to get certified, and the other is what value potential employers place on the fact that you are certified. And I guess the only advice I can give is be very clear in your mind that there is a difference between the two. And you can probably achieve all the value of all the learning by taking the topics and reading through all the brilliant tutorials and things, and maybe find some past papers. I honestly don't know how much importance employers place on certification. I would also say it's worth distinguishing between C# as a language and ASP.NET Core, or web forms, or Blazor, or etc. My guess is that most C# certification will be a mixture of language and some platform things. I suspect that there aren't many people who are quite as purist as Bill, myself, and Mads. C#, if it uses console.writeline, that's a bit too platform based, but yeah, so again, if you're looking at certification, are the platform relevant to you? But I don't know details on any particular certification.
Awesome.
Yeah, way back when I think I got like certifications because I used to work for a Microsoft partner. And so like for them to keep the status, like they were gold partners or something, like they wanted the employees to get the certifications. But I don't know if that changed or not. So I'll go and switch to one question from the audience. I think that one should be easy, but for people that want to try. So how do I know when a new feature is available to try in a preview release? Are you planning to release new features incrementally during the year?
Ooh, that's a good question. I like that.
Yeah, we do have a preview language version, so you can say lang version preview in the C# project file, and that way you get whatever features are currently in preview, which of course changes over time. Some of them might eventually get yanked. Some of them will ship later as part of a numbered version, but may change shape over time. So you can be part of trying things out by using that preview version, and that happens throughout the year as we ship updates to the compiler, essentially. So obviously, you live in a world of danger if you can't rely on any of these features, but you can try them out. I don't know of a particularly good place to find out which ones are there. Maybe some of the doc people on here know how you can find out.
I've previously found the Visual Studio release notes to be pretty good in terms of this preview. This release contains these new features. It's been reasonably reliable. But if you want to look at everything that's been released since the version you've got that's a year and a half old or whatever, there'll be a lot to look through. But if you're keeping up with latest and greatest and want to see what's new,
and what I should be doing, and I hope to get this onboarded fairly soon, is there'll be under the C# docs, there's a what's new page. And at least for the what's new in C# 10, I try to get those updated for when it's in a public preview. I do sometimes fall behind, and it might lag the public preview by a week or 2 weeks, depending on how quick Jared tells me I missed one. But but I usually try to get those updated, and then I'm filling in the rest of the content around that once the feature's in a public preview. But so
I just want to pick up on something Bill said there about when Jared tells me that I've missed something, which is that this is all a very human thing. Yeah, we've got automation and processes and things, or rather Microsoft has. I'm not part of this. But it's quite easy sometimes to forget, particularly if you get frustrated that the new feature you're waiting for doesn't quite work how you want it to, or isn't in preview yet. It's quite easy to forget that there are people behind all of this, and people working really hard. And it can be that a feature might be later than you want it to be. So remembering that they're real people can be very important when you're giving feedback in particular.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think the human aspect is very important. And more often than not, real quick, I was just going to add that if you want to get into Jon Skeet's inbox, just ask a question on Stack Overflow and tag it with C#.
No, and I think just to relate it to this question that Bill was saying about the docs. So like, do you have any trick to be updated of new features? I think the best trick here is to look for the what's new in C# docs, because Bill does a great job of trying to document all the latest features.
And then I just put in the private chat, which David or Myra, you can share with everyone. There's a doc on the Roslyn repo that I also used to track. And the big thing I look at there is on the state. Once it says it's merged into something, that is how I get my clues that it's, it's already there, or it's in the master branch and it's going to be shipping in, the branch that's tagged. So you can see, like in for C#10, which is why I haven't done it yet, almost everything is in progress or in a prototype and not merged yet.
Awesome.
Do you have any other?
Yeah, there's more questions here that have been asked before. Let me pull them up.
Because then we balance.
Yep. So what's your inspiration for new ideas and for the future? This is one's kind of touching on the future aspect again. So just what do you do to get inspired, right? Because it's an open thing and there's many other people, there's different languages, there's different platforms, different opportunities. So what is it specifically that you do to get inspired? I'm going to start with John.
Oh, well, for new ideas in general.
In general, yeah. What's your inspiration?
Well, for the last year, as it happens, it's been what does my church need? So I've been spending most weekends and quite a few evenings and things coding bits of an AV system for the church that I attend, and also helping run Zoom services and things. And that's been a really it's been inspirational to me just to be able to use technical skills on a very practical level. I am the customer, or someone else that I'm training from down the road is the customer. And that's quite different from a day job of building client libraries that a customer I may never meet and I'll never see what application they're building and things. It's really different and much more just close to home, basically. And I've been having a lot of fun, huge amounts of fun recently, talking to hardware. So just to, if I just reach out, my latest gadget, and there is a YouTube video on this because I blogged about it. This is an X-Touch Mini, which is connected to a digital mixer via the network, but via some C# code. So if I change this, oh no, actually I quit the application before we started this stream just in case it was going to interfere with anything. But yeah, this would be able to mute the mixer and do all kinds of things, but only because I wrote the code to interface the two of them in C#.
That's awesome.
So yeah, playing with hardware and doing stuff for my church, basically.
So are you saying you didn't trust the code you wrote for a live stream?
Well, I do, but it ends up, given that my network has been cutting out a bit, the mix.
Oh, there it goes.
Including all the current, all the current levels and things. So I was fearing that it might be contributing to my network lag a bit.
Oh, cool. Anyone else here want to take that?
Doing stuff like this, talking to folks a lot. That's probably my primary source of inspiration. The kinds of questions and problems and ideas that people bring in conversation, and also user group meetings, and mostly conversation. That is, I mean, there are many sources of inspiration, including looking at old languages and stuff, but that's the one I think that is most consistent.
Developer community. That's what it is for me, certainly.
Yeah, and I've used this when I've talked to people who might want to work on our team in terms of docs, is that there are times when you completely flip what you normally do as a developer. As a developer, you're given a problem and it's like, okay, so how would I solve this problem? And with what I do, so much of it is I want to teach somebody a certain technique or a certain feature. So what's a problem that would be interesting that shows how to use this feature? So it's like totally reverse. And as I've talked to people in conferences, I've said that, when we talk just about like the latest features and when they're available, when I can start using some of those to teach myself, what I do is like anytime I might be able to use a new feature, I throw it in there just to see, do I like the way this looks? Does this fit here? And, that's kind of how I develop, well, okay, how often will I use this? In what situations will I use this new feature? And in what places is it's like, no, I like the way I've been doing it and it really doesn't fit here.
I love the analogy you did with like the breakfast, for example, for async, that kind of thing, like real world examples trying to match with the code. And it's like, so that you can get the concept behind it, not just like the code part, right?
Thanks. That one was also a lot of fun to write.
And to pick up on Bill's point there, one of the difficulties when I've done something a little bit like that, try a new language feature, put it into my current code base, or some new code I'm working on, it can be very difficult if it doesn't work out, doesn't look as nice as you expect it to. You can't tell whether this is not the right place to use the feature, because not every feature needs to be in every bit of code, or whether you're just holding it wrong. And when it is very much on the bleeding edge and, you're writing the first tutorial about it or whatever, you often can't tell the difference between those two things. Mm-hmm. Or maybe the abstract idea of the feature works, but some aspect of it just doesn't quite work. When record types were in very early development around C#6, I want to say, Mads, there was a preview version, and I tried it for Nodetime and wrote a blog post saying, I'm sure this would be great, but it doesn't help me at all because these things. And I suspect that now actually it would, but basically there was something like it would only work for types with public constructors and various other restrictions. So it could be that the idea of the type works with the feature you're trying to do, but the current implementation doesn't, or that it doesn't fit at all, or that you're just doing it wrong. And it can be really hard to get the sort of perspective for which of those it is.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome.
All right. I'm picking one from the audience now. Will the language always try to be backwards compatible, or is there some future possibility of a breaking change?
Of course, I can't say what we'll be doing 10 years from now. I think that there's a connection between this question and the ever expanding number of ways of doing things that we talked about earlier. I have a hard time imagining that we will start truly breaking things, but I could imagine that there would be parts of the language where we would be nudging you to use them less, not because it's hard for us to maintain or something like that, but just to keep that notion of, well, the time for that feature has kind of passed. Like, there are better ways of doing this in C# now. That goes to both between, so we would probably not do that in the language per se, but between documentation. So Bill essentially saying, well, these are the ways that these are the things you should be using in C# for these purposes now, and also tooling support, where we have great semantic tool support based on the Roslyn system in the C# compiler that can tell you that's not probably how you want to do this. Why don't you hop on over and do it this way instead?
Awesome. Anyone else want to chime in on that? No? Yeah, the future ones are tough, right? Can't make promises. Are there any other questions here in chat, Myra?
We do have a few, but I'm trying to pick like some of the more interesting ones. Like, I think we're all gonna be biased towards this one. For a newbie, do you think C# is the best language to start with? And I think like the whole panel will say yes to that one.
Well, yeah.
It doesn't say to be unbiased, so absolutely.
Yeah. So I had before I joined Microsoft for a few years, I was teaching boot camps and doing the curriculum for C# at a organization in Detroit called Grand Circus. And they ran these in for JavaScript and for C#, and I think they've since added a few others as well. I know there's a mobile one that concentrates on Swift and Android platform and so on. And none of those are wrong, right? In that any of those are worthwhile. I think the reason C# is a good one, and these are the metrics I would use for whatever you want to learn if you're just beginning programming, is can you build what you want to build with it, right? So like I would not choose Swift if I wanted to build server applications, because Swift is primarily for the iOS platform, So can I build what I want to build with it? Is there a market professionally for it? Especially if you have that aspirations to be a professional developer and go into the workplace. Is there job opportunities, and is it growing or is it shrinking, or where does it sit there? And then are those skills something that you're going to be able to expand with? And here I think there is something true about C# and the whole curly brace C family of languages. It's not really hard to go from JavaScript to C# or C# to JavaScript to to C++ to Java and back and forth, because the syntax is similar enough. You can squint and read it and see what you're doing. So for all those reasons, I think those are all good choices. And of course, I'm biased. Yeah, so I'll say C#.
And I think we're coming to time here. So there's so many questions on the chat that we didn't get to it. I feel like we should have a second round of this in the future again.
Absolutely, I agree to that.
I'll be happy to.
Happy to.
So Myra, who do we have next week? I have it scrolling here on the bottom.
Fastest NuGet package ever published from Saeed. Like I'm so bad. Like I should have the schedule open.
I know I got so many buttons here. I'm trying to click. Minimize this. Press that. Fastest NuGet package ever. Probably. I love that. Yeah, next week, tune in. And yeah, we're getting close to our time. So are there any closing thoughts from our guests today? Any final words of wisdom? Any last words here, like go try Java instead, or Java is superior because it's not typed?
I guess I would say this has been a lot of fun. I've enjoyed chatting with you and answering the questions and chatting with everybody. I think probably close back where we started with, now that the C# standard repo is public, everything that you want to do as part of this process, from coming up with new ideas to the Roslyn, the implementation, to the standardization process, to describing it, to the docs on it, it's all open source, and you can help us participate either by logging issues when you see them, logging ideas as issues when you see them, helping us make improvements in any of those areas. We're working hard to make it as inviting as we can, and to do a better job of making it easier for people to come and participate. In all aspects of C# and .NET. And I think that's overall a really good thing, and a good way for everyone watching to get involved, however it's best for you.
Shameless plug, use docs.microsoft.com.
Yep.
Awesome. Any closing words from you, John?
Yeah, just an encouragement for folks to not take things too seriously. If it's been a while since you have written some code, just for the joy of starting with a blank page and ending with something that you've learned something, or you've done something fun, or you've got something you can play with your kids, or whatever it is, just do something just for fun. With C# or frankly with any language, but we deserve to be kind to ourselves, and sometimes that is just playing with a language for the fun of it.
Awesome. And Mads, anything?
Yeah, well, they took all the good ones, but yes, as I alluded to before, engagement is our lifeblood. It's how we make the right stuff. And how we know that we're doing it, or when we're not. Just keep that coming, and as Jon said, yes, have fun, have fun.
Awesome. Well, this has been a lot of fun. Thank you all so much. This has been great. We'll definitely have to try to do another one. So thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Bye,
Thanks
everyone.
all.
Yep.
Bye.